Dust kicked up from Cole's hover horse as he guided the last of the purple cattle toward the settlement gates. The alien beasts moved slowly in the afternoon heat, their 6 legs creating an odd rhythm against the red sand of Red Rock Mesa. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead and pulled his wide-brimmed hat lower against the twin suns hanging in the orange sky. This was his life now. No fancy starships or galactic politics, just him, his animals, and the endless frontier that stretched beyond the canyon walls. The colony needed food, and the purple cattle provided the best meat on this side of the galaxy. Simple work for a simple man, or so everyone thought. Cole had been herding cattle on Red Rock Mesa for 12 years. He knew every rock formation, every hidden water source, and every dangerous path through the Crimson Canyons. The settlers trusted him to bring their livestock safely across terrain that had claimed dozens of other herders. What they didn't know was that Cole had learned his skills during 5 years of military service, tracking enemy movements across hostile worlds before deciding that civilian life suited him better. The purple cattle lowed softly as they entered the settlement's energy fence. Cole dismounted and began the evening count. 23 head all accounted for. Tomorrow he would take them out again to graze in the northern valleys where the grass grew thick and sweet. It was routine work, but Cole found peace in the routine. A distant rumble made him look up from his count book. Thunder was rare on Red Rock Mesa, and the sky showed no sign of storms. The rumble came again, deeper this time, echoing off the canyon walls like the call of some massive creature. Cole's hover horse shifted nervously beneath him, its mechanical systems registering vibrations that organic ears couldn't detect. Something was wrong. Cole left the cattle with the settlement's automated herding system and rode toward the source of the sound. His grandfather had taught him to investigate strange noises rather than ignore them. On frontier worlds, ignoring the unusual could get you killed. The rumble led him into the deeper parts of the Crimson Canyons where few settlers ever ventured. The red rock walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, creating a natural maze that confused most navigation systems. Cole knew these paths well, but he had never heard sounds like this coming from the deep canyon. As he rounded a bend in the narrow passage, Cole saw something that made him stop his hover horse completely. A massive pile of fallen rocks blocked the canyon ahead, but the rocks were moving. Not falling or shifting naturally, but pushing outward as if something enormous was trapped beneath them. The rumbling sound came again, and this time Cole realized it wasn't thunder or geological activity. It was a voice. Something was calling for help from under those rocks. Cole approached carefully, his hand resting on the plasma rifle attached to his saddle. Frontier life had taught him caution, but it had also taught him that sometimes helping others was the difference between surviving and thriving in harsh places. "Hello?" he called out. "Someone under there?" The rock stopped moving for a moment. Then a voice answered, speaking in accented but clear human standard language. "Yes, I am trapped. These stones are too heavy for me to move alone." The voice was deep and resonant, unlike any human voice Cole had ever heard. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the rock itself. But the words were polite, even formal, and carried no threat. Cole dismounted and examined the rock pile. The stones were huge, each one weighing several tons. No normal human could have survived being trapped under such weight, and no normal human could have spoken so clearly from beneath them. But the frontier had taught Cole that normal was a flexible concept when dealing with alien species. "I've got some demo charges," Cole called out. "Might be able to blast you free, but I need to know what you are first. Don't want to hurt you by accident." Silence stretched for a long moment. Then the voice spoke again, more carefully this time. "I am Draknari. My name is Ember. I mean no harm to your people or your world." Cole had heard of the Draknari in spacer stories and military briefings. Ancient dragons that had once ruled vast portions of the galaxy, before disappearing into deep space thousands of years ago. Most people considered them myths, stories told to entertain children or frighten new recruits. But here on the frontier, Cole had learned that myths often had roots in reality. "Dragon, huh?" Cole said, checking his demo charges. "Well, Ember, I'm Cole. Let's see about getting you out of there." He placed the charges carefully, using techniques learned during his military service. The explosion would need to be precise to avoid causing a larger cave-in. Cole retreated to a safe distance and triggered the charges. The blast echoed through the canyon like thunder, and rocks flew in all directions. When the dust settled, Cole saw movement in the newly opened space. Something large and dark was emerging from the hole. Ember was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Her scales shimmered between deep red and gold, catching the light of the twin suns. She was easily 30 feet long from nose to tail, with wings that folded against her sides like massive leather cloaks. Her eyes were ancient and intelligent, holding depths that suggested wisdom far beyond human understanding. But despite her impressive size and obvious power, Ember looked tired. Her scales were dulled in places and her movements spoke of long travel and exhaustion. "You have my gratitude, Cole of the Frontier," Ember said, bowing her great head slightly. "I have been searching for someone very important to me, and these rocks trapped me for 3 days." Cole nodded, trying to appear calm despite the fact that he was talking to a creature from legend. "Looking for someone out here? This isn't exactly a popular destination." Ember's expression grew sad. "I search for my clutch sister, Flame. We were separated over 2 centuries ago during the great diaspora of our people. I have followed energy traces across many worlds and they led me here to your Red Rock Mesa. 2 centuries. Cole tried to imagine searching for a lost family member for that long and couldn't. The dedication required was beyond human comprehension. "Well," Cole said, "I've been herding cattle across this planet for 12 years. If there's another dragon here, I would have seen her by now. But maybe your sister moved on? Or maybe you're tracking something else." Ember considered this. "Perhaps. The energy signatures I follow are strange. Unlike normal Draknari life signs, they seem to come and go, appearing in one system and then vanishing completely." Cole felt a strange tickle in his memory. Something about disappearing energy signatures sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. His grandfather had told him many stories about strange things seen in space, but most of them had seemed like tall tales at the time. "These energy signatures," Cole said slowly, "do they show up near asteroid belts? Places where old ships might hide?" Ember's eyes widened and she leaned forward eagerly. "Yes, exactly. How did you know this?" Cole smiled, remembering his grandfather's voice around the campfire during long winter nights. "Because I think I know what you've been chasing, Ember, and if I'm right, your sister might not be as lost as you think." 3 days later, Cole found himself in the most unusual situation of his life. He was sitting around a campfire with a 30-foot dragon, sharing stories and preparing for a journey that would take them halfway across the galaxy. Ember had insisted on traveling together after Cole explained what he knew about the mysterious disappearing ship. The fire crackled between them as Cole prepared a simple meal of frontier rations. Ember didn't need to eat often, she explained, but she enjoyed the warmth and light of the flames. It reminded her of better times when dragons gathered in great councils to share wisdom and plan for the future. "Tell me again about this ghost ship," Ember said, her voice soft but eager. "Your grandfather saw it with his own eyes?" Cole nodded, stirring the pot of stew that would serve as his dinner. "Grandpa Pete was a salvager back in the day, worked the asteroid belts looking for valuable materials and abandoned ships. He told me that story maybe 100 times when I was a kid." The fire reflected off Ember's scales as she listened intently. Cole had never seen anyone, human or otherwise, hang on every word the way this ancient dragon did when he talked about his grandfather's adventures. "It was about 40 years ago," Cole continued. "Grandpa was working the belt between here and the consortium border worlds. His sensors picked up something big, but every time he got close the readings would shift or disappear completely. Took him 3 weeks to finally get a visual." Ember's tail twitched with anticipation. "What did he see?" Cole smiled at the memory of his grandfather's excited voice describing the discovery. He said it was the biggest ship he'd ever seen, but not built like anything he recognized. Organic looking, like it had been grown instead of constructed. The hull seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting slowly like a sleeping animal. This detail made Ember sit up straighter. Breathing hulls were a signature of advanced Draknari bioengineering, a lost art that few of her people remembered how to create. Grandpa managed to dock with the ship and get inside for about an hour before something spooked him. He said the corridors were alive, pulsing with soft light that guided him deeper into the ship. But when he reached what looked like the central chamber, his equipment started going crazy, sensors screaming, communication systems failing, even his air recycler acting up. Cole paused to check his stew, remembering how his grandfather's voice had changed when describing what happened next. The old man had been genuinely frightened by something he'd seen in that ship, He found rooms full of pods, Ember. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one was connected to the ship's biosystems by tubes and cables that looked more like veins than wiring. And inside the pods, what? Ember whispered, though Cole suspected she already knew the answer. Sleeping dragons. Young ones, from what he could tell. Some no bigger than hover cars, others the size of shuttlecraft. All of them in some kind of suspended animation, their life signs so low that most sensors would read them as dead. Ember made a sound deep in her throat, somewhere between a purr and a sob. Cole had hit something important, something that meant more to her than he fully understood. Grandpa tried to wake one of them, but that's when the ship's defenses kicked in. Not weapons or security systems, but something that got inside his head. Made him see things that weren't there. Hear voices calling his name from empty corridors. He barely made it back to his salvage ship before whatever was protecting those dragons decided he was a real threat. The dragon was silent for a long time, staring into the fire with ancient eyes that held depths Cole couldn't fathom. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion. Your grandfather found a nursery ship, Cole. One of the great vessels my people built during the Exodus, designed to carry our young to safety when the galaxy burned with war. Cole had heard bits and pieces about the ancient wars from history courses in school, but the reality of living through such times was beyond his imagination. How long ago was this Exodus? 3,000 years by your human counting. When the machine races first began their expansion, and biological worlds started falling one by one. My people built these ships to preserve our future. Each nursery ship could carry hundreds of eggs and young dragons in suspended animation, along with the knowledge needed to rebuild our civilization. Ember stood and walked to the edge of their small camp, looking up at the stars that filled the frontier sky. I was already ancient when the Exodus began, tasked with guarding one of the nursery ships. But something went wrong. We were attacked, separated from the fleet. I managed to escape, but Flame and the others were lost. She turned back to Cole, and he could see hope burning in her great eyes. If your grandfather found a nursery ship with sleeping dragons inside, then some of my people survived. Flame might still be alive. Cole understood now why this was so important to her. It wasn't just about finding a lost sister. It was about finding the future of an entire species. There's more to the story, Cole said carefully. Grandpa tried to go back to that ship several times over the years. Sometimes he found it, sometimes he didn't. But when he did find it, he noticed that it was changing position, moving through the asteroid belt slowly like it was searching for something. Ember's eyes widened. Searching for what? That's what Grandpa never figured out. But he had a theory. He thought the ship was dying, slowly losing power over the decades. The biosystems were breaking down and the dragons inside were running out of time. He believed it was looking for help, or maybe for other ships like itself. The implications hit Ember like a physical blow. If Cole's grandfather was right, then Flame and the others had been slowly dying for 40 years, trapped in failing systems while their ship wandered the asteroid belt in a desperate search for salvation. We have to find that ship, Ember said urgently. If there's even a chance that Flame is still alive. Cole nodded, though he knew the journey wouldn't be easy. The belt is consortium territory now. Lots of military patrols and automated defense platforms. Getting there without being detected will require some careful planning. The consortium, Ember said with distaste. Your people's most advanced civilization and also their most ruthless. They would not hesitate to capture a nursery ship for study. This was true, though Cole hadn't considered the political implications until now. If the consortium learned about a ship full of sleeping dragons, they would see it as either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be exploited. Either option would be good for Ember's people. We'll need supplies and a ship, Cole said, already planning their route. I know some smugglers who run goods between the frontier and consortium space. They might be willing to help for the right price. Ember looked surprised. You would do this for me? Risk your safety for strangers you've never met? Cole smiled and stirred his stew one more time before serving himself a bowl. Ember, I've spent my whole life on the frontier where helping your neighbors isn't optional if you want to survive. Besides, Grandpa always said that some stories were too important to remain just stories. Maybe it's time someone finished what he started. The dragon settled back down beside the fire, her expression thoughtful. There is something else you should know, Cole. The ship your grandfather found, if it truly is a nursery ship, will be more than just a vessel. It will be alive in ways your people might not understand. And if it has been alone and dying for 40 years, it may not trust strangers easily. Cole nodded, though he was already thinking about the practical challenges ahead, getting to the asteroid belt, finding a ship that appeared and disappeared at will, and then somehow gaining access to a dying alien vessel that didn't trust outsiders. It sounded impossible, but Cole had learned something important during his years on the frontier. Sometimes impossible just meant that nobody had tried the right approach yet, and sometimes the right approach came from the most unexpected places. Well then, Cole said, raising his bowl in a toast, I guess we'd better figure out how to make friends with a dying ship full of dragons. Ember's rumbling laugh echoed across the frontier night, full of hope and determination. Tomorrow their real adventure would begin. Rose Chen had been running smuggling operations for 15 years, but she had never been asked to transport a 30-foot dragon before. She stood in the cargo bay of her modified freighter, the Morning Star, watching Cole explain the situation to her crew while Ember waited patiently outside the ship. Let me understand this correctly, Rose said, her arms crossed and her expression skeptical. You want me to carry you and your dragon friend into consortium space to look for a mythical ship that may or may not exist, while avoiding military patrols that shoot smugglers on sight. Cole nodded. That's about the size of it. Rose had known Cole for 3 years, ever since he'd helped her crew repair their ship after a crash landing on Red Rock Mesa. The cowboy was honest and reliable, 2 qualities that were rare in her line of work, but this request seemed beyond crazy. The cargo bay can handle her size, Rose's engineer said after examining Ember through the viewport. But we'll need to modify the life support systems. Dragons breathe differently than humans. Ember had been remarkably patient during the negotiations, understanding that trust took time to build between strangers. But Rose could see the urgency in the dragon's ancient eyes, the desperate hope that Cole's grandfather's story might lead to finding her lost sister. There's something else you should know, Rose said quietly, pulling Cole aside. Word's already getting out about your dragon friend. 3 days ago, Consortium intelligence started asking questions about unusual energy readings from the Red Rock Mesa system. They're sending a task force to investigate. Cole felt his blood run cold. How long do we have? Maybe a week before they arrive. But if they're already asking questions, it means someone's been watching and reporting. Rose looked troubled. Cole, there are people in the consortium who would kill for the chance to study a living dragon. And if they learn about this nursery ship... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Cole understood the implications. The consortium had a reputation for taking whatever they wanted in the name of scientific advancement and galactic security. Then we need to move fast, Cole said. Can your ship make the run? Rose was quiet for a moment, considering the risks. Smuggling was dangerous enough without adding consortium military pursuit and ancient alien mysteries to the mix, but she had built her reputation on taking jobs that other captains wouldn't touch. Double my usual rate, she said finally. And if we find this ship, I get salvage rights to any technology that isn't directly related to keeping dragons alive. Cole agreed immediately. Rose's greed was predictable and honest, which made her trustworthy in a way that idealistic people often weren't. The Morning Star departed Red Rock Mesa 2 hours later, using a flight path that would take them through neutral space before entering the asteroid belt. Ember had folded herself into the cargo bay with surprising grace, though her presence made the ship feel much smaller than usual. Rose's crew consisted of 3 people besides herself: Jack the engineer, Maria the pilot, and Sam the communications specialist. All of them had criminal records in consortium space, which made them ideal for this kind of mission, but also meant they couldn't afford to be captured. So what's your story? Cole asked Rose as they sat in the ship's small galley, sharing coffee and watching stars stream past the viewport. How does someone go from consortium citizen to frontier smuggler? Rose was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee and considering how much to reveal. I used to work for Consortium Research Division, Xenobiology Department, studied alien life forms and how their biology could be adapted for human use. Cole waited for her to continue, sensing there was more to the story. 5 years ago, my team was assigned to study a captured hive drone, the machine races that have been expanding through the outer rim, assimilating everything in their path. Command wanted to understand how they converted organic worlds into mechanical ones. Rose's expression grew dark as she remembered. What we found inside that drone was horrifying. Not just machine parts, but organic components that had been forcibly converted from their original forms, living tissue twisted into mechanical functions, conscious minds trapped inside artificial bodies. She took a sip of coffee, her hands steady but her eyes haunted. I wrote a report recommending that we destroy the drone and all research related to it. Command classified the report and ordered us to continue the research. They wanted to know if the process could be reversed, if we could turn hive machines back into organic life. Cole was beginning to understand why Rose had left the consortium. They wanted to use the same process the hive uses? Worse, they wanted to improve it. Create hybrid soldiers that combined the best of organic and mechanical systems. Humans who could interface directly with machines. Dragons who could be controlled by computer programs. Entire species converted into living weapons. The implications made Cole sick. So you ran. I stole the research data and destroyed the lab. Killed 3 years of work and set back their program indefinitely. Then I disappeared into frontier space and started smuggling. Rose smiled grimly. It's honest work compared to what I used to do. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the bridge. Rose, you need to see this, Maria called over the intercom. We've got company. Cole and Rose hurried to the bridge where Maria was studying sensor displays that showed 3 ships moving to intercept them. The vessels were sleek and heavily armed, bearing the distinctive angular design of consortium military craft. Destroyer class, Jack reported from his station, fast and well-armed. They're demanding we stop for inspection. Rose cursed under her breath. Consortium patrols were supposed to be lighter in this sector, but apparently someone had leaked their departure from Red Rock Mesa. Can we outrun them? Cole asked. Not with Ember aboard, Rose said. The extra mass is affecting our acceleration curves. We'll have to try talking our way out of this. The lead consortium ship opened a communication channel, and the face of a stern military officer appeared on the main screen. Cole recognized the type immediately. Career soldier, ambitious and absolutely convinced of his own righteousness. This is Commander Stone of the CNS Vigilant, the officer said. You are in violation of consortium airspace regulations and carrying unregistered alien life forms. Prepare to be boarded. Rose put on her most innocent expression. Commander, we're carrying legitimate cargo to the frontier colonies. Our manifests are in order and we have proper transit permits. Stone's eyes narrowed. Our intelligence suggests you are harboring a Draknari fugitive and planning to enter restricted military zones. This is a matter of galactic security. Cole felt his heart sink. Stone knew exactly who they were carrying and where they were going. Someone had provided the consortium with detailed information about their mission. Furthermore, Stone continued, I am authorized to use any means necessary to secure the Draknari specimen for consortium research. You have 1 minute to surrender peacefully. Rose cut the communication channel and turned to her crew. Battle stations. Looks like we're doing this the hard way. Cole had never been in a space battle before, but his military training kicked in automatically. What can I do to help? Keep Ember calm, Rose said, already planning evasive maneuvers. If she panics and starts moving around in the cargo bay, we'll lose attitude control. The next few minutes were chaos. Rose pushed the Morning Star through maneuvers that tested the limits of its structural integrity, while Jack rerouted power from non-essential systems to strengthen their shields. Maria's piloting skills were extraordinary, threading their ship through the asteroid field while avoiding weapons fire from 3 military vessels. But it quickly became clear that they couldn't escape by speed alone. Stone's ships were faster and better armed, designed for exactly this kind of pursuit. That's when Ember made the difference. The Dragon had been listening to everything through the ship's intercom system. When the first energy blast struck their rear shields, she made a decision that surprised everyone aboard. Ember began to sing. Her voice resonated through the ship's hull, creating harmonic vibrations that interfered with the consortium targeting systems. The military ships found their weapons' accuracy degrading rapidly as their computer systems struggled to compensate for the unexpected acoustic interference. What is she doing? Rose shouted over the sound. Dragon songs can disrupt most electronic systems, Cole called back, remembering something Ember had mentioned during their journey. It's one of their natural defense mechanisms. The effect was remarkable. Within minutes, Stone's ships were falling behind, their targeting computers confused by the harmonic interference. Rose used the opportunity to push deeper into the asteroid field, where the larger military vessels couldn't follow safely. But their victory was temporary. Stone would report their location and capabilities to Consortium Command, and next time they would be ready for dragon songs and evasive maneuvers. "We need to reach that nursery ship fast," Rose said as they finally escaped immediate pursuit. "Stone won't give up easily, and now he knows what we're capable of." Cole nodded, but he was thinking about Rose's story and Stone's determination. The Consortium wasn't just hunting one dragon or one ship. They were part of a much larger plan that involved converting living beings into weapons. And somewhere in the asteroid belt ahead, a dying ship full of sleeping dragons was waiting for help that might come too late. Finding the nursery ship took 3 days of careful searching through the asteroid belt. Cole's grandfather had left detailed notes about the general area, but the ship's position kept shifting as its dying biosystems followed patterns that made sense only to alien intelligence. Ember spent most of those 3 days in a state of growing agitation. Her scales dulled with worry, and she barely spoke except to provide occasional guidance about Draknari technology. Cole could feel her anxiety like a physical presence in the ship's cramped cargo bay. "There," Ember said suddenly on the 3rd morning, her great head lifting as if she had heard something only she could detect. 2 degrees to starboard. "She's calling to me." Rose adjusted their course, and slowly, the Shepherd's Rest appeared on their sensors. At first, it looked like just another large asteroid, its surface mottled with what appeared to be rock and metal debris. But as they drew closer, Cole began to see the subtle patterns that marked it as something far more significant. The ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than Rose's freighter. Its hull curved and flowed like living tissue, with sections that seemed to pulse slowly in the vacuum of space. Veins of bioluminescent material traced across its surface, forming intricate patterns that shifted and changed as they watched. "It's beautiful," Maria whispered from the pilot station, "like a living mountain." But Cole could see what the others missed. The patterns in the bioluminescent veins were irregular, flickering like a failing power grid. Sections of the hull showed discoloration that suggested disease or damage. The ship's breathing rhythm was labored, like an exhausted animal struggling for each breath. "She's dying," Ember said softly, confirming Cole's observations. "The biosystems are failing after centuries of isolation." Rose maneuvered the Morning Star toward what appeared to be a docking port, though it was unlike any human-ship interface Cole had ever seen. The port itself seemed to recognize their approach, opening like a flower to welcome them inside. The docking process was smooth but alien. Instead of mechanical clamps and pressure seals, organic tendrils emerged from the nursery ship to embrace Rose's freighter, with gentle but secure grips. Cole felt the ship settle into place with a sense of completion, as if they had been expected. "Atmospheric readings show breathable air in the docking bay," Jack reported. "Pressure's good, temperature's comfortable. Whatever else is wrong with this ship, life support is still working." Cole and Ember prepared to board the nursery ship while Rose's crew remained behind to monitor sensors and watch for pursuing consortium forces. Cole carried his grandfather's old scanner, hoping that the device might help them navigate the alien vessel. The airlock opened onto a corridor that took Cole's breath away. The walls were clearly alive, covered with a smooth material that pulsed gently with inner light. Veins of luminescent fluid ran along the ceiling and floor, creating a network of organic circuitry that responded to their presence. As they walked deeper into the ship, the corridor walls began to glow more brightly, as if the vessel was waking up after a long sleep. Cole could hear subtle sounds around them, the whisper of air circulation, the distant rhythm of some massive heartbeat, and occasionally what sounded like voices speaking in languages he couldn't understand. "The ship is trying to communicate," Ember explained, her voice hushed with reverence. "Nursery ships are grown with a form of biological consciousness, designed to care for their young charges even if no adults are present. She recognizes me as Draknari and is attempting to establish contact." They reached an intersection where 3 corridors branched off in different directions. Without hesitation, Ember turned left, following patterns in the wall lighting that Cole couldn't interpret. "How do you know which way to go?" he asked. "The ship is guiding us," Ember replied. "She knows why we're here." The corridor led to what Cole's grandfather would have called the central chamber, though it was unlike any ship's bridge he had ever seen. The room was circular and vast, with a domed ceiling that showed stars wheeling overhead. But Cole realized after a moment that he wasn't looking at the real sky. The ceiling was displaying the ship's memory of its home system, showing constellations that had been destroyed thousands of years ago. In the center of the chamber stood a pillar of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Ember approached it carefully, placing one clawed hand against its surface. Immediately, the crystal flared with brighter illumination, and Cole heard the ship's heartbeat grow stronger. "She remembers me," Ember said, tears flowing down her great cheeks. "The ship recognizes my biosignature from the time before the Exodus." Images began to appear in the crystal pillar, scenes from the ship's long journey through space, showing glimpses of the dragons sleeping in their preservation chambers. Cole saw dozens of young dragons, each one unique in coloring and size, all of them frozen in time while their ship searched for a safe haven. But as the images progressed, Cole began to notice problems. Some of the preservation chambers showed warning lights indicating system failures. Others appeared to be completely dark, suggesting that their occupants might already be beyond help. "Ember," Cole said gently, "we need to find your sister quickly. Some of these systems are failing." Ember nodded, wiping her tears away with determination. She spoke to the crystal pillar in the musical language of her people, asking questions that the ship answered with more images and symbols that appeared in the air around them. "The preservation chambers are this way," Ember said, leading Cole toward another corridor. Flame should be in Section 7 if she survived the journey. They moved deeper into the ship, passing chambers filled with equipment that Cole couldn't identify. Some rooms contained what looked like libraries, with information stored in crystalline matrices instead of books or computer files. Others held gardens where alien plants grew in careful arrangements, providing oxygen and food for the ship's biosystems. But it was clear that many systems were failing. Plants showed signs of disease, crystals flickered with unstable energy, and some corridors were completely dark where the bioluminescent circulation had stopped working. Section 7 turned out to be a vast chamber filled with preservation pods arranged in neat rows. Each pod was connected to the ship's biosystems by thick cables that pulsed with flowing nutrients. Cole counted quickly and estimated there were at least 200 pods in this chamber alone. Most of the pods glowed with steady light, indicating that their occupants were still alive. But Cole could see that approximately a quarter of them were dark, or flickering with warning indicators. Ember moved through the rows with growing urgency, searching for the specific pod that held her sister. Cole followed, noting that each pod seemed to be labeled with symbols that identified its occupant. The markings were beautiful but incomprehensible to human eyes. "Here," Ember said suddenly, stopping before a pod near the center of the chamber. "This is Flame's chamber." The pod glowed with weak light, but Cole could see that its biosystems were clearly failing. Warning symbols flickered around its base, and the nutrient cables showed signs of deterioration. Inside the pod, visible through a transparent membrane, lay a dragon smaller than Ember but clearly related. Her scales were deep gold with veins of red, and her breathing was so slow that Cole initially thought she might be dead. "She's alive," Ember whispered, "but barely. The preservation systems are breaking down." Cole examined the pod's connections to the ship's biosystems, using his grandfather's scanner to analyze what he found. The readings were alarming. Not only were Flame's life support systems failing, but the damage appeared to be spreading throughout the ship. "Ember, this isn't natural system failure," Cole said grimly. "Someone or something has been deliberately sabotaging these preservation chambers." Ember looked at him in shock. "What do you mean?" Cole showed her the scanner readings, pointing out the patterns of damage that couldn't be explained by age or wear. "Look at these connection points. They've been severed and then partially repaired over and over again. Someone has been slowly weakening the life support systems for years, maybe decades." The implications hit both of them at the same time. The nursery ship hadn't been randomly discovered by the consortium. Someone had been monitoring it, gradually weakening its defenses and life support systems to ensure that any dragons found inside would be helpless. "It's a trap," Cole realized. Someone wanted the dragons alive but vulnerable, easy to capture and control. Before Ember could respond, they heard the sound of ships docking with the nursery vessel. Multiple ships arriving with military precision. "Cole, Ember, get out of there now." Rose's voice crackled through Cole's communicator. "Consortium forces are boarding the ship. Looks like they've been tracking us since we arrived." But as Cole and Ember tried to retreat from the preservation chamber, They found their path blocked by armed soldiers in consortium uniforms. Commander Stone himself led the group, his expression triumphant. "Surrender peacefully," Stone commanded, "and we might allow some of the dragons to survive in our research facilities." Cole looked at the 200 sleeping dragons around them, then at Ember's desperate expression and made a decision that would change everything. "Ember," he said quietly, "you told me these ships have consciousness. Can you wake it up completely?" Ember's eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. "That would be incredibly dangerous. A fully awakened nursery ship has defenses that could destroy everything in this system. But it might also be the only way to save your sister and the others," Cole replied. Stone was advancing with his soldiers, confident that his prey was trapped. He had no idea that he was standing inside a sleeping weapon that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Ember looked at her dying sister, then at the other failing preservation chambers around them. "If we do this, there's no going back. The ship will defend itself and its charges with everything it has." Cole smiled grimly. "Good. It's about time someone taught the consortium that some things aren't meant to be captured." Commander Stone approached through the preservation chamber with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled the situation completely. His soldiers spread out in tactical formation, covering all exits while keeping their weapons trained on Cole and Ember. But Stone's attention was focused on the rows of sleeping dragons around them. "Magnificent," Stone breathed, examining the closest preservation pod. 200 specimens, maybe more. "Do you have any idea what this discovery means for galactic security?" Cole kept his hands visible but ready, watching for any opportunity to act. "I know what it means to you. Another chance to turn living beings into weapons." Stone laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the bioluminescent chamber. "Weapons? You think too small, Cowboy. These dragons represent the future of consciousness itself. Imagine minds that can live for millennia, combined with technology that responds to thought alone. The applications are limitless." Ember's scales darkened with anger, but she remained still. Cole could sense her preparing for something, drawing on reserves of power that she hadn't revealed before. "The consortium has been studying Draknari biotechnology for decades," Stone continued, running his hand along one of the preservation pods. "But we've only had fragments, pieces of dead ships, and incomplete data. This vessel will provide everything we need to understand how your people integrate consciousness with living machines." Cole's blood ran cold as he understood the full scope of Stone's plans. This wasn't just about studying dragons or even converting them into weapons. The consortium wanted to understand the fundamental relationship between mind and biotechnology that made Draknari civilization possible. "You're talking about enslaving an entire species," Cole said. "I'm talking about evolution," Stone replied. "Humanity's next step forward. Dragons bonded to human operators, ships that think and grow, weapons that adapt to any enemy. The Hive Collective won't stand a chance against technology like this." One of Stone's soldiers approached with a scanning device, reading the biosignatures from Flame's failing preservation pod. "Commander, this specimen is in critical condition. Life support is failing across multiple systems." Stone nodded as if he had expected this. "That's why we need to move quickly. Begin extraction procedures on the viable specimens. The research division has transport containers prepared for long-term hibernation." Cole realized with growing horror that Stone wasn't just planning to study the dragons. He intended to remove them from their ship entirely, separating them from the biosystems that had kept them alive for centuries. "You can't do that," Ember said, speaking for the first time since Stone's arrival. "Remove them from the ship's biomatrix and they'll die within hours." Stone smiled coldly. "Our scientists believe they can maintain the specimens in artificial preservation systems. Of course, some losses are inevitable during the transition process." The casual way he discussed the deaths of sentient beings made Cole's hands clench into fists. But before he could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. "Actually, Commander, I think you'll find the situation more complicated than that." Rose Chen stepped into view from behind one of the preservation pods, but she wasn't alone. 3 more people in consortium uniforms accompanied her, though Cole didn't recognize them as members of Stone's boarding party. "Agent Chen," Stone said with obvious surprise. "I wasn't aware that Research Division was sending personnel on this mission." Rose smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "There are many things you weren't aware of, Commander. For instance, did you know that this ship has been under consortium observation for over 15 years? Cole felt the world shift around him as he understood what Rose was saying. She hadn't left the consortium 5 years ago. She was still working for them, and everything about her smuggling career had been an elaborate cover story. The research division has been monitoring this vessel since it first appeared in the asteroid belt, Rose continued. We've been gradually weakening its biosystems to ensure that any specimens recovered would be manageable for transport and study. Ember's roar of rage echoed through the chamber, causing several preservation pods to flicker as their biosystems responded to her emotional state. You've been slowly murdering my people for over a decade. We've been ensuring their survival, Rose replied calmly. Left alone, this ship would have died completely within another few years. Our intervention has kept the specimens alive long enough for proper recovery. Cole stared at Rose, trying to reconcile the woman who had shared coffee with him and told stories about her past with this cold scientist who discussed genocide, as if it were routine maintenance. The cowboy and his dragon friend were the perfect excuse to accelerate our timeline, Rose explained to Stone. Their arrival gave us cover to move in with full extraction teams without arousing suspicion from other galactic powers. Stone nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Agent Chen. How long will you need to prepare the specimens for transport? That depends on the cowboy, Rose said, turning to Cole with an expression that might have been regret. Cole, you have a choice to make. Help us extract the dragons safely, and we'll ensure they're treated well in our research facilities. Some of them might even survive the process. Cole looked around the chamber at the rows of sleeping dragons, then at Ember's desperate expression, and finally at his grandfather's scanner still clutched in his hand. The device was showing readings that none of the consortium personnel had noticed yet. Or, Cole asked, buying time while he studied the scanner's display. Or we extract them without your help and losses will be considerably higher, Rose said. The choice is yours. But Cole was no longer listening to Rose's threats. His grandfather's scanner was detecting something that the consortium's more sophisticated equipment had missed. The ship's biosystems weren't just failing randomly. They were shutting down in a specific pattern, following pathways that led to a central consciousness node. The ship wasn't dying. It was preparing to wake up. Ember, Cole said quietly. How long does it take for a nursery ship to fully awaken from hibernation? Ember's eyes widened as she understood what he was asking. If the consciousness core is intact, only a few minutes. But the process requires a specific activation sequence. Stone was growing impatient with their conversation. Enough delays. Begin extraction procedures immediately, Rose signaled to her team, and they began approaching the nearest preservation pods with specialized equipment designed to disconnect the dragons from their life support systems. Cole watched in horror as they prepared to begin a process that would kill dozens of sleeping dragons. That's when he made his decision. Cole pulled out his grandfather's scanner and threw it as hard as he could at the central crystal pillar that controlled the chamber's biosystems. The device shattered against the crystal surface, but not before uploading the activation sequence that his grandfather had discovered decades ago. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystal pillar flared with brilliant light, and the ship's consciousness began to emerge from its long sleep. Bioluminescent patterns raced along the walls and ceiling, and the preservation pods began to glow more brightly as power flowed through restored systems. What have you done? Stone shouted, raising his weapon toward Cole. But before he could fire, Ember acted with the speed and fury of her ancient heritage. Her roar shook the chamber, and her claws struck the floor with enough force to crack the biomaterial beneath them. The ship responded to her call, recognizing one of its original guardians and responding to her desperate need. Tendrils erupted from the walls and floor, moving with liquid grace to entangle Stone's soldiers. The weapon's fire that filled the chamber struck harmless biomatter that regenerated faster than it could be damaged. Rose backed away from the chaos, speaking urgently into a communicator. Research control, the ship is awakening ahead of schedule. Recommend immediate extraction of all personnel. But the ship's awakening consciousness had other plans. As its awareness spread throughout its vast hull, it began to understand what had been done to it over the years. The sabotage, the slow poisoning of its systems, the plans to steal its precious charges, and it was not pleased. The chamber began to change around them, walls flowing like liquid to reconfigure the space according to the ship's will. Preservation pods moved to protected alcoves while defense systems that had slept for centuries began to come online. Cole grabbed Ember's leg as the chamber transformed around them. Can you communicate with the ship? Make it understand that not all humans are enemies? Ember placed her claws against the nearest wall, speaking in her musical language to the awakening consciousness. The ship's response was immediate, creating a protected area around Cole even as it continued to deal with the consortium soldiers. She understands, Ember said. The ship knows you helped to wake her. You are under her protection now. Stone and his remaining soldiers found themselves herded toward the exit by relentless biomechanical defenses. Rose's extraction equipment was being dissolved by acids that the ship secreted from its walls. This isn't over, Stone shouted as he retreated. The consortium fleet will return with enough firepower to destroy this entire asteroid belt. But as the last of the consortium forces fled from the awakening nursery ship, Cole realized that Stone's threats might be meaningless. The ship they had awakened was far more powerful than anyone had imagined, and it had been alone and afraid for far too long. Now it was awake, angry, and ready to protect its children from anyone who threatened them. The real battle was just beginning. The awakening nursery ship pulsed with new life as Cole and Ember made their way back to Flame's preservation chamber. The bioluminescent pathways now blazed with restored power, and the ship's consciousness spoke in harmonious tones that resonated through the living hull. But Flame's condition had not improved. If anything, the decades of sabotage had taken their toll, and her life signs were growing weaker despite the ship's renewed vitality. The damage is too extensive, Ember said, her voice heavy with despair as she examined her sister's failing preservation pod. Even with full power restored, the biomatrix has been compromised for too long. Cole studied the readings on the ship's organic displays, noting patterns that reminded him of sick livestock on the frontier. Sometimes an animal was too weak to survive alone, but could recover if given the support of the entire herd. Ember, you said this ship has a collective consciousness. What happens if all the dragons wake up at the same time? Ember looked at him in alarm. That would be incredibly dangerous. Dragons awakening from centuries of hibernation need time to adjust gradually. Waking them all at once could cause massive system shock. But would their combined life force be strong enough to heal the damaged biomatrix? Cole pressed. Ember paused, considering the possibility. In theory, yes. Dragons share a form of collective consciousness when we're in close proximity. If they all awaken together, they could pool their strength to repair the ship's damaged systems. The ship's consciousness seemed to be listening to their conversation, because new images began appearing in the crystal displays around them. Cole saw representations of the awakening process, showing how the dragon's combined life force could indeed restore the failing biosystems. But the images also showed the risks. Dragons awakening too quickly could experience severe disorientation, possibly even madness, and if the collective consciousness became unstable, it could tear the ship apart from within. It's our only chance, Cole said, making a decision that surprised even himself. Flame and the others are dying anyway. At least this way they have a fighting chance. Before Ember could object, Cole placed his hands on the ship's control interface and began the emergency awakening sequence. The ship's consciousness resisted at first, understanding the dangers involved. But Cole's determination and desperation finally convinced it to begin the process. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Throughout the vast nursery ship, preservation pods began to open simultaneously. Dragons that had slept for centuries stirred to life, their consciousness merging into a collective awareness that grew stronger with each awakening mind. Cole felt the power building around him like a storm made of living thought. The ship's biosystem surged with renewed energy as hundreds of dragons added their life force to its struggling consciousness. Flame's eyes opened. She was smaller than Ember, and more delicate, with scales that shimmered between gold and crimson. But her eyes held the same ancient intelligence that Cole had learned to recognize in her sister. Ember. Flame's voice was weak but clear. Is it really you? The two sisters embraced with a reunion that had been 2 centuries in the making. Around them, other dragons were emerging from their preservation pods, disoriented but alive. The collective consciousness was stabilizing as more minds joined the network, but their celebration was interrupted by urgent alarms from the ship's sensor systems. Commander Stone had not retreated as far as they had hoped. A full consortium battle fleet was approaching, armed with enough firepower to reduce the asteroid belt to cosmic dust. They mean to destroy us rather than let us escape, one of the newly awakened dragons observed. His scales were deep blue and his voice carried the authority of age and experience. I am Elder Storm. I remember the ancient wars and I recognize the patterns of total warfare. Cole looked at the tactical displays, counting dozens of military vessels converging on their position. The nursery ship was powerful, but it was still recovering from centuries of damage. A direct confrontation seemed hopeless. Can the ship move? Cole asked. Find somewhere safer to complete the healing process? Not quickly enough, Elder Storm replied. We need time to fully integrate the collective consciousness and repair the ship's primary systems. Time we do not have. That's when Cole had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. What if we don't try to escape or fight? What if we do something they don't expect? He began explaining his plan to the assembled dragons, using the ship's communication systems to reach every awakened mind simultaneously. The idea was audacious, risky, and based on a fundamental understanding of both consortium psychology and frontier pragmatism. You want us to surrender? Flame asked, though Cole could sense she was beginning to understand the deeper strategy. I want us to appear to surrender while actually doing something completely different, Cole clarified. The consortium thinks in terms of capturing resources and controlling threats. They won't expect us to offer them exactly what they want while taking away their ability to use it. The dragons considered Cole's proposal through their collective consciousness, debating the risks and possibilities with a speed that human minds couldn't match. Finally, Elder Storm spoke for the group. It is unconventional and dangerous, but it might work precisely because it is so unexpected. As the consortium fleet closed to attack range, the nursery ship began to implement Cole's plan. Instead of running or fighting, it did something that stopped Commander Stone's forces completely. It divided itself. The massive bioship began to split along natural fracture lines, each section becoming an independent vessel capable of sustaining a small group of dragons. What had been one enormous target became dozens of smaller ships, each one following a different trajectory away from the asteroid belt. But that wasn't the most surprising part of Cole's strategy. Each newly formed ship carried a different message to the galaxy's civilizations. Some headed toward human frontier colonies, others toward the mysterious Hive Collective, and still others toward neutral systems that had remained independent of all major powers. The dragons weren't running away. They were introducing themselves to the galaxy as a renewed civilization, one that remembered its ancient history and had learned from centuries of isolation. This is Elder Storm of the Draknari. The blue dragon's voice transmitted across all communication frequencies. We return to the galaxy not as conquerors or victims, but as participants in its future. We offer knowledge to those who seek wisdom, protection to those who face extinction, and partnership to those who choose cooperation over domination. The consortium fleet found itself in an impossible position. They could destroy some of the escaping bioships, but not all of them, and attacking would make them the aggressors against a species that was offering peaceful contact with all galactic civilizations. Commander Stone's voice crackled over the communication channels, full of frustrated rage. This is not over. The consortium will not allow alien influences to destabilize galactic order. But his threats carried less weight now. The dragons were no longer isolated and vulnerable. They were part of the galaxy again, with potential allies and trading partners among every major civilization. Cole found himself aboard one of the bioships with Ember and Flame, watching the stars wheel past as they headed toward frontier space. The ship was smaller than the original nursery vessel, but it was alive and growing stronger with each passing hour. What will you do now? Ember asked him as they prepared to reach the frontier colonies. Cole smiled, thinking about the purple cattle waiting for him on Red Rock Mesa and the simple life he had left behind. I suppose I'll go back to herding cattle. Someone has to keep the frontier fed while you dragons figure out your place in the galaxy. But even as he said it, Cole knew that his quiet frontier life was over. He had become the first human to participate in the rebirth of Draknari civilization, and that carried responsibilities he was only beginning to understand. Flame approached them, her scales now glowing with renewed health. You saved us all, Cole of the Frontier. Not just our lives, but our future as a people. How can we repay such a debt? Cole thought about it for a moment, then grinned with the practical wisdom that had carried him through his frontier years. Just remember that not all humans are like the consortium. Some of us believe that the galaxy is big enough for everyone, as long as we're willing to share it. As their bioship approached the frontier colonies, Cole could see other dragon vessels spreading across the galaxy, carrying news of an ancient people's return to the stars. The consortium would have to learn to share power with civilizations that remembered when the galaxy was young, and somewhere in the asteroid belt, the remains of the original nursery ship continued to pulse with life, serving as a beacon for other dragon survivors who might still be searching for their way home. Cole's grandfather had always said that some stories were too important to remain just stories. As it turned out, sometimes the most important stories were the ones that led to entirely new chapters being written. The cowboy and the dragons had given the galaxy a gift it didn't know it needed, proof that ancient wisdom and frontier pragmatism could work together to create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. And in the vast reaches of space, that was a lesson worth learning.